Gem International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. Gem International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Martyn Element. He's a Vancouver marketing and corporate advisor who focuses on sourcing and pursuing new business ventures and opportunities, no matter where they happen in the world. And just the last few months, you've talked to us from London, you've talked to us from Sydney, Australia. Martyn, you have a great global perspective on what's going on out there. And right now, what are people talking about the most?
Talking about the U.S. dollar becoming par with the parity with the euro, and a lot of that is all stitched into the strength of the American economy, with the dollar trading at these all-time highs, with the Dow trading at all-time highs, and so much of this is because, of course, the rule book in 2017 was ripped in half with the shock of the BritX in June, and then the shock to the pundits and to the economists of Donald Trump. And still the explosions are happening. The explosions are still happening. As little time ago, as a few days ago, the ambassador for Great Britain in Europe, Sir Robin Rogers, or I can't remember his name, but they gave him his walking papers because they found an internal document. He's basically a skeptic and would appear to want Britain to stay in, and he was really giving all the reasons why this was not such a good idea. And hang on a minute, you're the ambassador for Great Britain, the British public has spoken, and he was supposed to leave in October of this year, and they gave him his walking papers here a few days ago. So the explosions and the repercussions are still going on because of that. The other thing, of course, that people are still talking about in huge proportions is the migrating of these immigrants. These poor, a lot of them poor, innocent people, the majority of them families, of caught between the awful fights and wars that are going on in these dreadful places in the world, and they are migrating they're showing their unhappiness with their feet and any which way they can, as we know, getting across out of the country, but are causing huge problems politically within the countries that they land, and huge problems financially. And I think there doesn't seem at the moment to be an end in sight of that, although the problems over in the Middle East seem to be coming into to an end as far as the immediate problems regarding ISIS. But coming back to this financial problems, it causes huge problems and ricochets all around the world, including Britain as part of their reasoning on BritX, of course, is they want to have some monitoring of how many people are going to come on to that little island, and and I hope that doesn't sound from Martyn Element saying that as a racist situation. It becomes economic. I mean, there are some things that become very very problematic if they're left to be, and so there we've seen the changes, and we've got Donald is making huge changes. We've seen uranium come back to be a lot more favorable. I think I saw $21 where it was 11 or 12 before his election as far as a value as a product, which is a huge move percentage-wise. So a lot of the uranium players are a lot happier. You saw a rally on iron ore. It didn't last. It fizzled a little bit recently, but that was all petered back. Copper was coming back. And you've got some of the major corporations we've talked about before being the number one performing stocks, such as the techs of the world, because of these base metals doing so well. So things are lining up very, very well and very interesting. So for what next? What happens next? What happens when he's sworn into oath? I mean, is the world going to stop in America? Obviously, I don't think so, and obviously the investing and the economics don't think so either, or saying no. They're loving the new idea of resurrecting the American. But I do see inflation. I do see having to make all these huge mega projects which are being talked about, because I think we all know, if we ever go down to the United States, that the infrastructure does need renewing. It does need money spending on it. And what has gone on, I think, in the last few decades is trillions of dollars have been spent outside of America, trying to be the policeman, trying to help other countries, or interfering, if you wanted to take the other avenue of statement, with these other countries around the world, while their own country is having record numbers of people in their jails. You've got record numbers of problems on their own streets, and the infrastructure itself, simplistic things such as railway lines, roads, airports, are in sadly need of spending, and need to be brought up to today's 217. And I think Trump will go a long way to doing that. But in doing it, he's going to have to print more money, I guess, and he's going to have to, the interest rates are going to start moving up. They already have. And, that's good for gold, of course, which, this being the city that it is, Vancouver, a lot of people are very happy to hear that, and we're seeing some significant evidence of that just in the last 24 hours. So it's an interesting time, and of course, sailing up through the middle, you've got Tesla. I just read yesterday has opened up the gigafactory that they've opened, this huge factory in Nevada for producing that they've done with
the lithium
which
batteries.
One of the majors have they done that with in Nevada, Jim?
I know, it's one of the Japanese car makers, I believe.
Yeah. So they've done a mega factory there, and as soon as he's announcing he's opened that and done that, there's another one announced somewhere else in the world. So the lithium space is still very, very healthy, and we're seeing evidence of that within some of the stocks locally. And, it seems to me that the opportunities do abound at the moment. I mean, I was in a brokerage firm this morning, and here we are, the last week of some of the people wandering back to their desks, and some people coming back and starting on Monday as their first day back at business. But I can tell you, I haven't seen the brokerage firm that I was in. I have not seen it that well attended by brokers in over a month and a half. It was, everybody at his post, everybody working. Well, they are going to be, because so many of these deals are doing right out of the gate in 217 are doing so exceptionally well. So the brokers are back at their posts. And it's time to, I just heard the announcement for the Cambridge show that comes up at the end of this month. And it was being announced as the show that's on the 22nd and 23rd here in Vancouver, that the numbers of attendees are more than double what they were last year. Well, there's, how much of an indication do you need that it's game very rapidly getting back on again? Although, as I've stressed over and over and over again, we have not had locally, which I've experienced in my lifetime on more than one occasion over the last 30, 35 years, we haven't had the stocks that have gone from $1 to $9 or $19 or $25. We just haven't had those sorts of movers in any numbers, or any that I'm familiar with. I'm sure there's some in the biotechs. But, those days, if they come back, people say, oh, they'll never come back. We'll never see them again. Well, guess what? If lithium, some of the people that are down on lithium are saying that, there'll be an oversupply in the next 2 years, and there'll be this, and those numbers aren't there. And if those the cars, and people decide that they all want to have more lithium cars or more lithium solar panels on the top of their houses, then, and this is one commodity, one of the few commodities that China doesn't have control over, then the price of lithium goes even higher than where it is now. Let's say it doubles from where it is now, which could happen. Then look out, you could have some of these stocks going from a $1.5 or $2.5 to $20 or $15. So it's exciting times in different commodities. So I stress, and Jim and I were just saying a few moments ago, listeners, it doesn't make any difference though. It doesn't make any difference that it looks like it's going to be a heck of a year for these juniors. It's still very, very dangerous potentially. The Dow is where it is right now. And it's dangerous at any time that you get some of these stocks going. I met a fellow this morning who was very close to the marijuana companies and some of the successes there. And he said to me, he says, Martyn, do you know what some of these fellas have made? I said, yeah, I'm sure they've made, $5-10 million. No. He says, Martyn, some of them made $50 million, $100 million with these things. I said, it can't be that much money. He said, yes, that's the kind of monies that's being made again in some of these deals. Well, anytime you've got a shortage of supply, which we also discussed briefly, that it's the only game in town was the terminology he gave for investment, because there are no vehicles in the world to invest to get the benefit of this marijuana revolution that's going on. So, there are monies to be made, but listeners, my excitement and my enthusiasm be tempered in a major way. Please, you have to be careful. You've got to be careful.
We'll have more with Martyn Element right after the break.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Martyn Element. Martyn, we were talking about what direction things are going. The U.S. dollar still climbing. Well, in Hong Kong, their LIBOR rate hit 30% overnight. The reason being there's a shortage of U.S. dollars to pay off debts that are in U.S. dollars. And so all these Chinese business people are begging for money at any cost to pay off their bills.
Well, you're going to have these huge seismic type problems happening, Jim, because of the structure at the moment, because of the structure of the world, and because of the structure of the economies of the world. I was reading Historian just a few nights ago. I wouldn't say we're in new territory, but you've got to go back a long way in any history book. That's why Peter is such a successful man and such an interesting man. He's one of the most well-read men I've ever met. He reads many books, and he loves history books. And people love to read history books because, they say that we're just seeing repeats, different names, different players, but we're seeing repeats within business from things that have already happened 200-300 years ago in different circumstances in different countries and in different situations, but all comes back to the same method. Well, I don't know if we have seen the things that are happening. Are we seeing we're seeing the authoritarian type of players being given time here, the Donald Trumps of the world. And I think it's very disruptive. It's disruptive to business. It's, and it causes huge seismic type problems, and that could well be one of them, Jim, created because of the uncertainty in the world.
How hard is it for you, being a person who has to raise money to get new businesses off the ground, to do business in a very uncertain time?
Well, I don't actually raise, per se, the money anymore. What I do is I advise the clients to what I think would work, or where they should perhaps look to go, or how they should look to go, similar to somebody that we talked about in the past has had a new idea, with the rights issue. I didn't come up with that idea, he did, but it's worked very well. But I think you've got to be, there's a lot of expressions I don't like. I personally do not like that expression. Oh, that's a no-brainer. I hate that expression. That makes my teeth jar. But I do like the expression, I like some of them. You have to think outside the box. You have to think outside the box, because there's a client right now that's doing something in the lithium field. He's doing something very revolutionary, and I've been advising him for the last 12 months, and I've said to him many times just recently, you've got a fantastic idea there, but he happens to be putting it into practice and trying to prove it out here in Canada. But Canada's Canada. there's other places in the world where lithium is quite prolific in the ground. My advice to this particular scenario is Australia. Because you've got to be thinking outside the box. I mean, I spent a lot of time with the owner, who represents the owner of Aspromont, which is a listed company in Australia, which owns I think 6 or 8 publications in the mining space, including the famous Mining Journal, puts on tremendous shows around the world. They're a public entity, and I've spoken at length with the fellow who runs it, because he's come from the Microsoft. He's come from the technical side of things and the internet side of things and into the business. His father owns it and brought him in. So there's a man I've spent a lot of time with this last little while, and will spend a lot of time with in the future, apart from the fact he's a Liverpool supporter, as I am FC, of course. But, it's finding ways. You can only imagine the sort of sway that he has with doing shows in everywhere from Hong Kong to New York to Toronto to Australia to, I think he's doing Singapore, the Minds and Money shows. So, if you're advising a client and say, look, I think because of the influence and because of the attendees he's had in this show, and particularly in the Asia, and because of the product that you're working with, and because of the influence of that product in that part of the world, I think that you should attend that show, and you should go and spend the monies that he wants to charge to have that show. And I think you need, you've got a good company there. If you could speak at that show, that would be a plus. Now, is that financing the company? Probably that advice will lead very potentially into him getting financed. So you've got to, so there's always a way. There's always a way, Jim, and you've got to be, as I say, I'm repeating myself, I do like that expression, thinking outside the box. I think that is so important, and what makes this business so exciting, of course, that you're not boxed in and hemmed in, and this is the way it has to be done. And as Robert Friedland, the old, bringing his name up there, one of his most famous sayings is, money is like a river. It flows where it finds the least resistance. Well, that can be for many, many different sins. That can mean, many different things. But I think he's right, and I think you've got to go where that river looks like it's going to flow, and if you can stand or be in the general direction where that river is looking like it's going to break out and start flowing, you want to be standing there before it flows into that area. You need to be thinking, well, it looks to me like there's going to be, it's like trying to pick the right stock exchange. There's been so much print and press given to, of all countries in the world, the Russian stock exchange recently has just broken all records from performance. Who would have thought of investing in Russia with all of the turmoil and all of the things politically that go on coming out of that country? But their stock market, meanwhile, has had an unbelievable run, I'm being told, and you've got to be thinking outside the box. That's where, of course, the financial advisors, it's easy to buy the package deals. It's easy to buy the deals that are all done with a big bow on them and the return 16% per annum, and that's great and that's easy, and those fellows are doing very well and have done well for a long, long time. But it's the fellows that can find perhaps some of those other ideas. Yes, element, excuse the pun, of risk is there, listeners. Don't get me wrong. And that has to be monitored. It has to be notarized. It has to be said, look, to your financial advisor, you're managing $1 million of my welfare and my retirement pension there. But I'd like you to maybe, and I don't care what I have to sign, I'd like to be going into one of these more adventuresome stock markets in the world. Well, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, that is a high risk. It's a high return potential. I don't care. I want to put $50,000 of my money in one of those sorts of situations. And that's where you can get returns that are just unbelievable, because of what happens. But with returns comes unbelievable risk, of course, as well. And that's where you've just got to be very, very careful and try and pick the right situations, but it's exciting, and I see. So it's a very good question you asked me, Jim, by the way, and I hope I'm rising up for it here. So no, to give advice to these companies, these small little microscopic companies, is exciting in its own way, and you've really got to pick the right jockeys for the right horses and the right racetracks to the horses to be ridden at, and that's why I'm a big proponent, and I'm trying to do something very unique in my own world. I've said it before. I'm trying to do something very unique by listing a deal or deals down in Australia. I know I had the pleasure, by the way, listeners, it was a very short but a very good meeting just before Christmas. The head man who runs Canaccord in Australia, which I'm told, I don't know if it's the case right now, but it's been one of the most profitable profit centers for the Canaccord organization worldwide. A very dynamic young man, I'd say early 40s. He's up as we speak right now, skiing up at Whistler with his family. He's been up there since before Christmas. And he did not poo-poo me, listeners. He didn't say, well, I think that's crackers, or I don't think that's a good idea. He was all ears, and he didn't, he didn't sort of say, I think, and I also talked to another proponent who does business all over the world, also just before Christmas. And I said, what do you really think about that idea, Doug? And he said, Martyn, I think it has merit, and I think you should keep pursuing that. So it's thinking outside the box, and I love it. Because I've always been thinking outside the box as an individual, I feel, Jim, in life,
Martyn, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and I all the best to everybody around the world, and let's keep our heads screwed on, and listeners, if it gets tough sometimes and your shoulders get rounded and you start looking down at the pavement rather than keeping your chin up and your eyes open, if you keep your eyes open and your chin up, you'll see that nice new shiny bus coming down the road rather than seeing a dark gray pavement. You've got to, unfortunately it's so difficult to do sometimes, but you have to lift your spirits, keep your spirits up, keep your eyes and wits about you, and you'll be surprised what you can achieve.
Martyn, we'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, sir.
My guest has been Martyn Element, a Vancouver marketing and corporate advisor who focuses on sourcing and pursuing new business ventures. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. If you have any questions for us, you can email us at info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.